All right, welcome to Collective Conversations. I'm your host, Mike Brewer, and today I am honored to have a returning guest to the show, Donald Davidoff. Last time I called him David Donaldoff, and he had the grace to let me do that, but today it's Donald Davidoff, founder and CEO of Real Estate Business Analytics, otherwise known as Reba in the marketplace. Donald, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Always good to be with you.
Yeah, how are you doing as of late? I went back and I looked. It was March 22nd, March 15th, 2022. The reason I said the 22nd was it was June 22nd, 2023 at Apartmentalize that we spoke last, but our first real episode was dating back to 2022. So a lot has happened between then and now.
Wow. Yeah. So much has happened. I mean, we've transitioned from tech startup to fast growth tech company. That's for sure.
Congratulations.
36 logos, multi-millions in the revenue. Really proud, not only with the advancement of our first two products, Reba BI and Reba Budget. I'm sure we'll talk more about those.
Sure.
But we had our MVP for Reba Rent, the pricing revenue management solution, back, I want to say like February or March of last year. And we set November 1 as our GR date because that was OpTech, right? OpTech's our Super Bowl.
Yep.
And I'm super proud of the team because in software, you don't usually hit dates very well on schedule.
Sure.
And we nailed it. November 1 was our GR. We've already got 8 clients on the software, over 20,000 units live. Rollouts will be over 100,000 by April. So,
and tell us, for those who don't know what a GR is or an MVP is, just what are those things?
Yeah. So GR is general release date.
Mm-hmm.
So you realize acronyms are there to separate the learned few from the ignorant masses. So
That's right.
we're gonna try to get everybody to join the. I'm sorry, that was really obnoxious. Anyway,
got it.
You bring out the devil in me, Mike. Sometimes I'm just gonna say that. But no, GR is general release date. It's it's for any version, right? In our case, this was the first truly commercially ready version. MVP is an agile concept, minimally viable product.
Yep.
So if you remember back in the days, right, of what was called waterfall software, you did massive requirements, documentation, definition. Then you spent a year and a half building, and then you announced this great thing to the world. And most of the time people went, there's all these things that are wrong, right? And you're like,
right.
God, I spent 2 years. What do you mean I'm wrong? So it's very, very frustrating. In the 90s, late 90s, especially early aughts, this concept of agile software came about, and pretty much everybody in prop tech on the vendor side is doing agile or some form of it. And frankly, it's enabled by the internet, because part of why you did it the old way is those of us like you and me are old enough to remember when you got shipped physical hard drive, physical floppy disks or then CDs that you had to install from, right? So it was very much measure twice, cut once, because you had to do this massive mail with all the documentation. Everybody had to go through an upgrade, et cetera. Well, today we're also used to like Microsoft just updates on our machine and all that kind of stuff. So the fact that you can update quickly means that with software, you don't have to measure twice, cut once. In fact, it's better measure once. And, it's the move fast and break things, right? Like get something out there, because whatever you think is right, you're not going to be 100% right. So the sooner you can get somebody using it and complaining about it, the sooner you can fix it and make it better. And the idea is lots of quicker cycles of release. So an MVP is a minimally viable product, literally the absolute minimum functionality that is viable to be used. There's no way you're going to release it. Like our MVP, we were doing statistics calculations offline and plugging them in. Okay, well, for 1 or 2 properties to test out the modeling, that works, right? Sure. It's minimally viable. No way is that commercial release. So there was a big gap between the MVP and the CVP, commercially viable product, which is V1 on a general release date, right? GRs can be a V2, V3, et cetera. So anyway, there's a quick little lesson on agile and software acronyms.
I definitely appreciate that. I don't want to presuppose that everybody in the audience is going to know what those things are. And I've heard it mentioned as ship and iterate as well. So that to your point about the feedback loop, you can ship it, you can iterate based on the feedback.
Yeah, I want to be careful. I want to be careful that I enunciate correctly on ship and iterate.
Yeah.
But yes.
It's super simple to say it wrong.
Yes. I don't want to iterate, and you know what. So anyway, yes, ship and iterate. Absolutely. And that is our mantra at Reba. Again, we're not unique. I mean, any really quality software vendor is following those principles these days.
Well, I do want to congratulate you on that growth. That is spectacular. It seems like every time I see you out in the marketplace, usually at shows or conferences, it's like you are 100 miles an hour. It's like, hey, Mike, see you later. It's just on to the next meeting. So congratulations on that hyper growth, or what I'm going to call hyper growth.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get the spotlight here, but it's the team behind us. I mean, we're up to about 40 employees now. I am truly blessed with an amazing team. I mean, it starts at the top. I have a co-founder and our chief product officer, Chris Brust, who I've worked with since 1999. Our product manager on Reba Budget, I knew her the first time in 1999 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Our CTO is a former client of mine in consulting. I've known him since like 2012. So again, just everybody on the team is just spectacular. You can't do it without good people. There's just no way to do that.
That's so true. And that's awesome that you would edify all of them. And it makes me wonder from a CEO and a founder's perspective, I have to believe there's sort of a mix of people that are veterans either in the space or in relationship with you, and a blend of new people that you put together and create a team. Is there a ratio of good veterans to new people?
Yeah, well, I mean, what I would say is on the business side. So from a go-to-market and a implementation perspective, 90% of our associates, 80-90%, are industry veterans of some sort or another. It doesn't mean I knew them all.
Sure.
On the coding side, if you stick to that, you won't find enough good people. But I would say a good 40% of our coding folks have explicit multifamily or single family, so rental housing background. And that really helps us. The senior executive team, only our head of application development is a pure tech guy. And even he in his consulting days worked with the likes of Archstone and other stuff. So even he has a little bit there. So yeah, company-wide, it's probably 60-40, 65-35, which I think is part of our secret sauce. But it varies a lot by function.
I'm always curious about this, and it's born out of, I love Elon Musk. Like him or hate him, it doesn't matter. I like him, and I like certain things about him.
Okay, well, we'll arm wrestle another day, but that's okay.
Yeah, okay.
I respect the innovation he has brought to society.
Yeah, there definitely elements about his character that are off-putting and maybe just wrong. But that aside, I do admire. I was reading his autobiography recently, and Walter Isaacson describes where he's down on the shop floor. He's literally, he sits the engineer right next to the designer so that there's no middleman. Tell us how you do that. And where I'm going with this is you have an end user, right? And you have an engineer mindset, an end user mindset. There has to be, in my head, some intermediary there that helps business talk to engineer. Tell us how you solve for that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've never been asked that before. I think the most influential book I ever read was Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Agreed.
And truthfully, you can read the first 2/3 of the book and you're done. The last third of the book, I don't know. I think it just isn't as strong as the other stuff.
Sure.
But very early in the book, he talks about the first habit of highly successful people, which is begin with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I've always done that. I've always had a systems management and a project management feel for things. And so, everything that we build at Reba, I had to use, Chris, my co-founder partner, had to use back in our days on the operating side, et cetera. So, people at the company are tired of me using this metaphor, but it's a Microsoft saying. And to me, it just resonates. We ate the dog food. And so I always get teased for using that because it's kind of a little bit of a, I don't know, it's kind of metaphor, but it's really, really powerful. We ate the dog food. So we're not building anything that we haven't had to do or wish we could have. In fact, Crystal Wilson, our product manager on Reba Budget, 30 plus years of budgeting across 5 different companies. She starts every demo with a prospect talking about how she has the privilege now to build what she wished she had at every other job. So I think it starts with experts. I mean, Brad
Sure.
Shell, our product manager for Reba Rent, the pricing revenue management system. I met him when I was consulting with Irvine, and he had helped build a bespoke system at Irvine, and then he got involved with LRO, and just a smart young guy with a lot of experience. He's done it. He's eaten the dog food. So I think that's number one, right? Is our product managers and our senior execs all have done this. It's not new to them. Scott Wesson taught me a Tom Toomey saying, "Don't hire someone new to you to do something new to them." I've really kept that. So in my case, we're hiring, or in our case, I keep saying mine, it's really our. In our case, we've hired a lot of people to do, a lot of people who aren't new to us to do something that's not new to them. But we stick to that. The people from outside the industry, maybe there's something new to, maybe they're new to us, but we're asking them to do things they've done before around the coding side. Right?
That makes
sense. And then I've definitely taken some people that I know and have asked them to do something new to them because they're ready to step up. But that don't hire somebody new to you to do something new to them is really, really powerful. So that's another piece of the puzzle. And then the last piece is, I learned from watching executives in my career when I wasn't in the C-suite, and what the good ones did and the not so good ones did. And what I found that the good ones did, it's not that they were smarter, they were wiser. It's not that they were smarter or that they gave better answers. They asked better questions, and they created and encouraged and even sometimes forced scenarios for people to work together. So, your Musk comment, I certainly admire, and part of his success is forcing those people to sit and talk to each other.
That's right.
So, we have product advisory committees where our designers, talk to actual end users, right? We don't just sit in an ivory tower, come up with our answer, and announce to the world what a great job we did. I mean, God, if I had any opportunity to be arrogant, right, it would be around pricing. I mean, I led the team that built LRO.
Right.
I was the industry's first ever VP of pricing revenue management. Chris Brust, our chief product officer, that's how I met him, was doing pricing. He's been doing it almost as long as I have. I mentioned Brad's experience. We could have easily designed something on our own, brought it to market. Because we used a product advisory committee, I would tell you about 15% of the Reba product is different than the original idea that Chris, Brad, and I had. Right? Not 40, not 50. I mean, sure. I don't want to come across as, overly confident or dare I say arrogant. But I mean, Chris and Brad and I and other people on the team who've done this before, how far off could we be in designing something given the 25-year history we have, right?
Yeah.
But 15% is different because, I've been consulting for 10 years. Chris has been doing BI, not pricing. The other experience was very specific to one operator who, if you know Irvine, which you do,
sure,
it's a very unique portfolio, right? And so having 10 or 11 really experienced operators, pricing revenue managers from a breadth of companies, right? Public REITs, private large, private small, fee manager, institutional owner, having them go through what do they like about their current situation they would never want to lose.
Right.
What bugs them and do they wish could change, et cetera, et cetera. They came up with several things that changed our design, changed our approach.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the humility to be willing to be convinced. And to your Elon Musk example, it was forcing ourselves to sit across from the end user and do that. And we've done the same with with budget. We've done the same with BI, et cetera. In fact, the thing that scares me, and then I'll finally end this soliloquy, the thing that scares me the most about us being a virtual company, which we are, is, do you lose some of those by the way moments? Like it's very easy. It's easy in a company to become siloed, especially the bigger you become. When you're all remote, it's even easier to be siloed. And so, one of my jobs as CEO, and certainly the job of our executive team, is to constantly find ways, to sort of knock down the wall building that's going on. Not because people are intentionally or maliciously building walls. It's just really natural. You get comfortable, right? You get comfortable in your home. If you don't have walls, like the wind could blow. It could get cold. You could get rained on. So, we have to stay diligent for that. So I think I answered your question and maybe a couple others.
No, you did. And that's fantastic. I want to go back to something that you said, because I've become deeply interested in this in terms of leadership and leadership development, and the statement you made about really good leaders ask better questions. And you've always struck me as somebody that asks incredibly good questions. And I'm wondering if that, my imagination tells me that a lot of people, that's just innate in them. But from your perspective, could you teach or train people? And, or if you can't, how do you go about looking for people who ask really good questions?
Wow, such deep questions. That was a really good question. I mean, there is an innate curiosity. I mean, one thing that I have observed is there are people who are naturally curious and there are people who aren't.
Sure.
And I don't mean that as a judgment, good or bad.
No, it's true.
Right. But, people who are not naturally curious will fall into some functional expertise and do what they do, or I've seen senior executives who are not naturally curious or inquisitive. They've got a playbook and they just want to keep rinse and repeat.
Right.
It can work really well. In fact, frankly, in our industry, I mean, if you're doing operations, rinse and repeat's not all that bad, right? You can make a lot of money with good real estate on rinse and repeat. What's attracted me more to the innovative tech side is I'm not that kind of person. So God bless those people who are, because they're good places for them. But there is an innateness to this, as you first said. I do think that, though, even if you have an innate talent, right, it's sort of, go back to the 10,000 hours concept, right? Becoming an expert over 10,000 hours. I've always been amused by people overplaying the 10,000 hours, right? I could spend 10,000 hours playing basketball. I'm never going to be Michael Jordan. I don't have the innate skill or talent. That said, if Michael Jordan didn't do the 10,000 hours, and purposefully, he wouldn't become Michael Jordan. In fact, I had a rifle coach who distinguished between training and practice. He said, training is when you're trying to learn a new skill. Practice is when you're trying to repeat. So to get better, I was shooting rifles back in college. Training was what we did to try to get better. And then 2 weeks before any big match, we would go into practice mode, where it wasn't about getting whatever your flaws are. Like, I'm sure Tiger Woods does something like this with golf, or did something like this with golf, right? Sure. You work to hone and change your swing and this and that. But 2 weeks before the Masters, that ain't the time to try to learn something new. No. That's the time to just, muscle memory, get the practice in so that you're just doing it naturally, right? So I do think that you can train yourself and get better even with the innate skill. What made it to me, and it's interesting, you highlighted the asking good questions. So I paid for my college education with an Air Force ROTC scholarship. And at the ripe old age of 21, 22 years old, as a second lieutenant, I was suddenly the project manager for a 9-figure project in the Air Force on guidance and control systems for ICBMs. Wow. The customers who reported to me, right, the project leads at Lytton Guidance and Control or Rockwell or wherever. I mean, these were 55-year-old veterans. We had an organization, TRW, a company TRW, that gave us technical support. So I'm the lieutenant with a TRW guy at my side, and then the contractor. Now, imagine that triangle, right? Because TRW they got to prove their worth, right? They can't just agree with the contractor, or why do we need that? So I'm constantly facilitating battles between these two forces. Sure. I got an undergraduate degree in aeronautical engineering. I'm dealing with, graduate people with 30 years of experience in this space. And they look at me so what do we go do, Lieutenant? Pardon me, but I don't have a clue. This is my first job. I mean, I'm proud of my education, but really, guys? What I learned was, if I could ask a question, well, okay, so there's clearly a disagreement. Tell me about this. And then they would start to argue. Well, that's interesting. Tell me about that. Yeah. And if I could get 3 levels deep in questioning, one of the two would stay very calm in their discussion, and the other one would get very emotional. And 99 times out of 100, the guy who was getting emotional, they ran out of logical background, right? If I just went with the guy who stayed calm, I looked brilliant. I can't tell you the number of times I have no idea, technically, what decision I was actually making. But because I asked enough questions and one guy kept saying stuff that sounded reasonable and the other guy started grasping for straws.
Right.
I'm not going to say 100% of the time the first guy's right, 99 plus he is. So, it's sort of like I joke, that, the higher I get in an organization, the dumber I get.
Yeah,
right? There's not a day that goes by that my team doesn't say something about the product. And I'm like, oh, we can do that? I didn't know that. Right. So my job is not to be the expert on everything. That's crazy. My job is to create an environment where people can succeed, and where we have differences of opinion, how do we have constructive conversation, ask good questions? Your question about how do we teach people to do that? I think more by example than anything else.
I agree. Yeah.
I think by asking, like when someone comes to me with a debate looking for me to solve, I'll go, well, what did you ask them?
Yeah.
Right. So I might, maybe by prompting, by example. I don't think there's a class that you can teach on how to ask a good question.
I think the other thing you said there that is part of the answer is you probe 3 times. I've heard of the 5 whys, right? So you ask why is that? Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? And you kind of peel back the layers of the onion, so to speak. Yeah. So let's take a hard right here or hard left.
Hey, can I stick one thing in because you just brought up why? I will tell you, the question why is always interesting to me, and I've taught this in sales training, in leasing training. Why is a really dangerous question because of the 5 W's. Why is the only one that makes it sound like you've already made up your mind? It sounds very challenging.
Okay.
So I would encourage people come up with 4 or 5 different ways to ask the question why without using the word why. Help me understand. Could you explain? Double click on that.
Yeah.
I'm sort of curious. What's the rationale behind that? Right? Why do you think that? Whoa, how could you not see it all? Help me understand the rationale behind that. That is such a better way to ask why than the word why. So I actually try to avoid the word why as much as I possibly can.
That's really good feedback. And you also hit on something there too. You're oftentimes attempting to look at the thought process, not necessarily the content. It's how did you get to that answer?
Yes.
How did you get to that belief?
Well, and you can mean why completely non-emotively.
That's right.
Rarely gets heard non-emotively. And especially, I hope I'm nothing if not self-aware. I can be, shall I say, a bit of an intense personality. So for someone like me to ask why, I don't even realize how intensely that's coming across.
It can
shut people down. I spent a lot of time teaching myself how to ask why without ever using the word why. And that's served me very well.
I like that. That's really good feedback for everybody, for myself included. Okay, let's go back to the hard left, the hard right.
Yeah.
There is no shortage of news about revenue management these days. And I'm just interested because the last time I've talked to Dom Beveridge about this because he wrote a white paper on it. And I know you contributed to the white paper along with another gentleman whose name escapes me.
Jeffrey Roper.
That's right. But I am interested in your direct feedback about however you want to set it up and tee it off. I'm interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I'll say is I want to focus on the positives. I mean, the claims of the lawsuit, the claims behind the ProPublica article are pretty off the wall. At least the vast majority of those claims. I think the white paper speaks for itself. It's impossible to collude on pricing in this industry.
That's right.
I mean, in my consulting career, heck, I did a project for Rainmaker where we did cluster analysis on the parameter settings in LRO, and we found 5 distinct clusters that represented 5 very different business strategies, right? So, if my strategy is to aggressively pursue top-line rent because I want to sell and get a valuation, and you want to defend occupancy because you're a hold forever kind of guy, we could never collude because how could we both agree on what to do? Okay. So just the whole notion, this is not the kind of industry where collusion can work. It's also highly, highly fragmented. Right. I mean, it's just, the passions of the moment, the passions of the 15% year over year rent have led to this backlash. The fundamental underpinnings they're comical if it wasn't for how serious they could harm the industry and harm people. I mean,
That's right.
Occupancy is higher post revenue management than before because it helps companies more efficiently utilize their supply. Mm-hmm. So we're going to hurt, in a country that has a shortage of housing supply, revenue management actually helps with higher utilization. So the very people who want to help folks are going to hurt them if they succeed in killing revenue management algorithms. So, that aside, I guess one other thing that is in the white paper that I also point out is, people talk about holding an apartment to get higher rent. An apartment is not a barrel of oil or a tree in a forest, right?
That's
the Saudis can collude, because internationally it's legal to collude. Mm-hmm. They can collude and keep a barrel of oil in the ground, and 6 months from now or 6 years from now, sell it for more, if that's the way it works out. We're not selling an apartment, we're selling an apartment night, right? So holding an apartment, it takes a lot of plus 2% on the rent to make up for the minus 100 of that apartment sitting vacant for even one night, okay? So like people have to realize the product is not the apartment, the product's the apartment night. And once the night passes, I can't resell it. So there's no hoarding supply in order to get more money. The math just doesn't work that way. Okay, full stop. Okay, that's kind of my take on the farcical nature, however serious it may be anyway, of what these claims are. Now the reality is we are facing those, and the truth is there's a lot that people can do to protect themselves. There's a long history, 100+ year history of the Sherman Antitrust Act, that you can do anything you want with your own first party data. And I should disclaim, I'm not an attorney. I have had many conversations with attorneys over my pricing career. They all tell me the same thing. And, at Reba, we have gotten an opinion letter from a very experienced antitrust attorney who led one of the antitrust divisions at DOJ for several years. So, we put our money where our mouth is and have the documentation to prove it. But the simple fact is you can do anything you want with your own data. You can do anything you want with publicly available data, right? That's the old, you and I own a gas station. I look across the street, you raised your price 2 cents. I can raise mine 2 cents. Right. Screen scraping and other technologies are just faster ways of seeing what you did. There's tons of case law that's okay. So, to me, stay in bounds on that and you'll be okay. Now, going out of bounds on that doesn't mean that you are colluding, but it does open yourself to a claim. And that's where, people spend a lot of money defending themselves. So, I was taught this back at Tal Solutions, first day working for a pricing and revenue management company, like understand where the boundaries are and don't even come near.
Sure.
And, many attorneys have validated that opinion. And, we're sticking to how we design our system and what we're doing and what our benefits are. And, we'll help others as best we can. And we want the industry to not get swamped by some of the I'll say BS from the outside. Again, just go back and read that white paper. Dom did take the lead. Jeffrey and I contributed. It's a very, very compelling set of arguments as to how none of these accusations can even possibly be true.
It's incredibly well done. We'll link it up in the show notes. We've linked it up before, but we'll link it up again. It's very, very well done. Yeah. So you're, my timing might be off, but it seems to me you were building a product called Reba Rent right in the middle of this. And so
we started before.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did this, I guess, specifically influence, I know you got the opinion letter, but were there any fundamental changes that you made to your system?
Honestly, no, all it did was cause us to have to spend some money with an attorney to prove the point.
Understood.
We were already following the principles because that's what I was taught at Talos. So, if you look at how LRO is built, it only uses first-party data and publicly available third-party data.
So talk to us about, I have the benefit of having been around for a very long bit of time and watching even way back when you were developing LRO in the beginning at Archstone. I worked for Equity Residential at the time. I think
Mhm.
we later on adopted LRO.
Yes.
But and I'm probably going to butcher the terminology here, but there were two, when the competitors made their way into the space, there was a philosophy as it related to the competitors, and then there was an LRO philosophy, and there was a differentiating factor in there. And you probably cite it pretty quickly. But fundamentally, the way that those two pricing systems worked is yours more, maybe call it rules-based versus market force-based. Is that the way to delineate those two?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that so much.
Mhm.
I'll tell. Here's so what we did in building Reba Rent was we tried to build on almost 25 years of experience with
Mhm.
it, right? I tell the story, and you may have even heard me say this before. I'll change the year now since it's 2024. If 2024 Donald could go back and teach 1999 Donald one thing
Mhm.
the 99 Donald didn't know, the 24 Donald knows, it's this. 99 Donald thought, because everybody at Talos thought, because we came from travel and hospitality and the origins of revenue management,
Mhm.
we thought 80% math, 20% process. And that's how we built LRO. I don't want to speak for Jeffrey Roper, who led the team that built YieldStar, but Jeffrey and I were colleagues at Talos.
Mhm.
I suspect that if he heard that, he'd go, yeah, pretty much true. That's, I mean, again, YieldStar came from that same travel and hospitality background. He might argue the percentages, but different in degree, not kind. Okay. If there's one thing I've learned, it's 50-50, maybe even 60-40 process. Now, that doesn't mean that the math is unimportant or can be crap. It just means that in this industry, the process is even more important for several reasons. Okay. First of all, we are a highly inefficient market, right?
Mm.
And I mean that microeconomically. I don't mean that our people are inefficient, right?
Sure.
But go back to Econ 101, an efficient market, everybody knows everything immediately. Everybody's a rational actor, chasing the same goals. Okay. Well, in the airline world, which is where this started, right? United and American Airlines are pretty much chasing the same goals. The
Mhm.
data, everybody knows what prices are. $1 difference could make a big difference on who gets chosen in certain circumstances. In fact, all the money put into frequent flyer programs is to try to create, some difference to
Right.
make the market less efficient, right? Because efficiency tends to commodify things.
Right.
Okay. So we're a very inefficient market. As I said earlier, you might have a very different goal than I do. Data is not perfectly available. The products are not perfectly fungible, right? An airline seat's an airline seat in a lot of ways, but two apartments are not identical. So the notion that there's efficiently this precise to the dollar or to the penny optimal rent, it's kind of not true,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
There's more
Mhm.
some sort of range.
Sure.
Okay. So the math isn't as important when it's less efficient. You just need to be somewhere near the right answer. Also, the whole Daniel Ariely. I mean, if you want, maybe put this up on your link also. Anybody who cares, and this is a simple read, it's a 2-hour read. Get Daniel Ariely's book, Ariely, Predictably Irrational. Okay? He talks about how Homo economicus doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a rational buyer. In fact, humans are very irrational in their decision making. However, they're very predictable. Okay? One of the concepts he talks about is the economic transaction versus the social transaction, or economic contract versus the social contract. If you want a quick understanding of that, gift giving. In fact, there's a great Big Bang episode link on YouTube. Like, if I find it, I'll send it to you. You can stick it up there also. It's the one where Sheldon goes into you haven't given me a gift, you've given me an obligation. We each trade $50 until one
Yes.
of us dies $50 ahead of the other, right? So, if you think gift giving is inherently a negative economic transaction, because I have to guess at something that's valuable to you, buy it, I'm not going to be right 100% of the time. Right? So the expected value is less than what I'm going to spend.
Yep.
Okay. Try that argument with your significant other next Valentine's Day, coming up in just a couple weeks. Right? Honey, I'm going to have a negative expected value, so why don't you just buy your own thing? I'll give you $50. Try that. Because gift giving of that nature is not about the economic transaction. It's about the social contract.
Right.
Okay? Well, housing has a much bigger social contract value than an airline seat. Not as much as gift giving, right? It's a continuum.
Right.
But airline seats are about as purely economic as it gets, right?
Fair.
Housing is somewhere in the middle, maybe even slightly to the social contract side.
I would agree
right?
with that.
So hearts and minds become important, right? Whether the leasing agent thinks the price is fair becomes important.
Right.
Pilot at a plane doesn't care what anybody's paying in the back.
No.
Community managers and leasing agents do. Whether they should or not, different conversation, but they do.
Right. Right.
So all of that is to say that process is really, really important. And so one of the big things that we did, there's three big things we think Reba Rent does better than legacy systems. One is transparency. It is much easier for executives and all the way down to leasing agents to understand why the model is doing what it's doing. The answer is just as accurate, just as good, but it's more transparent. It's easier to understand when hearts and minds.
Mm.
Next thing, I was always frustrated that the vendors, they never really, you talked about the Elon Musk and begin with the end in mind and talk to the customer. They never paid attention to how people use the software. And so there were a lot of inefficiencies in the software. So we put a ton of energy into how do we improve a PRM's, a pricing and revenue manager's productivity.
Mm.
How do we make the software easier to use, quicker to use, fewer clicks, yada, yada.
Yeah.
If we can make it more efficient, then a PRM can handle more properties and larger operators don't need to spend as much on manpower as they have to for the legacy systems.
That makes sense.
So, by the way, to do that, there's a virtuous cycle with the first aim, because the more transparent, the fewer hours they have to spend explaining things. So you kind of get a virtuous cycle. And then the third one is there were just a lot of special cases that either didn't exist or weren't important in 1999, or we value engineered out of V1 because we were hacking through the jungle just trying to get it to work for stable properties.
Mm.
So, rent control was not a big deal in 99. It's a huge deal today.
That's
And
right.
it's not just rent control in terms of money. Like my favorite is the jurisdiction where if you're sending out 10% increase or more on renewal, you have to give 120 days notice, not 60. Or if the tenant's been there 3 years, you have to give longer notice, right? So it's not just money, but process. There were no process constraints back in 1989.
No.
So without the technical debt, we can start from scratch and build that kind of stuff into the software. And then special cases like lease ups and renos and small count unit types, like all those things, with 20 plus years of learning, we can build those better. Okay. And then my favorite one is concessions, because I didn't believe it in 99, but I couldn't convince anybody else. If you go back to the early aughts, mid aughts, and the hype around revenue management was going to get rid of concessions.
Yep.
By the way, I remember in the 1980s how computers were going to get rid of paper. How'd that work out?
Yeah.
Okay.
I print a lot more today than I did back then.
Actually, yeah, computers make it easier to print stuff. Right?
That's right.
So again, everybody thought concessions were going to go away. Fact of the matter is concessions exist for a lot of reasons other than the pure efficiency of pricing, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a psychology around them, how you go to market. We won't spend more time on all the reasons why, but concessions are going nowhere. They're here to stay. So we're not pretending otherwise. And so we've been able to build optionality and flexibility in how people choose to do or not do concessions that the legacy systems just don't have, because they were always built with this implicit assumption that all that mattered was the effective rent.
Mm-hmm.
You and I both know, yes, the effective rent is the most important thing. It's not the only thing. And
That's
concessions are important. They're here to stay. So let's use them better rather than pretend they're going to go away.
I think
That's
they play
the
to
third
that
area.
social side that you spoke about. Concessions play to that social side, which probably lends to the psychology remark that you just made.
Exactly. Exactly.
People want to get a deal and they feel like it's a big deal when they get a little bump or a little juice.
Well, that's why even back then I was like, guys, I don't think concessions are going to go away. People want a deal. In fact, I could never do this at Archstone. Our CEO and everybody else was against it. I wanted a tagline at Archstone where everybody gets $100
$100 a month
off. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I can price it so we can get $100 a month off. Anyway, whether I'm right or wrong on that doesn't matter. What matters is some people are going to want to drive to net effective for certain reasons. Other people are going to want to have a higher gross rent to give a deal. By the way, it's not just that people want a deal. Think about the valuation world, right? One of the things that I've said this since 1999. one of the things that I find fascinating about this industry, and it has not changed, it has not moved an inch. Okay. You've been on investment committees, you've been on deals.
Yes.
I come to you with a story, Mike, we're going to buy this property. Their current rent's $2,400. They have 1 month concession. The property's not well run. There's a little bit of deferred maintenance. They've been trying to sell it where they're not even as into that market as we are. We're going to come in and over a year, we're going to burn off that concession.
Management upside.
Green light, red light on that deal. Green light every day.
Yep.
Okay. Mike, we want to buy this property. Their current rent is $2,200. It's not really that well run. There's a little bit of deferred maintenance. They've been trying to sell it for a while. They're not really into that market the way we are, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to grow that rent from $2,200 to $2,400 in the next year. Green light, red light. Red light.
Right.
No investment committee is going to accept a 9% increase year over year in the first year.
Right.
Every investment committee will accept burning off 1 month free in the first year. It is the same cash flow.
Right. Exactly right.
There is arbitrage. So concessions exist. If you are valuation oriented, you want a concession strategy. It gives you a higher top line rent. You get a better value, right?
Yeah.
Again, I think it's irrational that those two stories, exact same cash flow, lead to opposite answers, but it's predictably irrational. So quit trying to make the world rational and just play business judo, and, use the arbitrage that's there to the advantage of whatever your business objective is.
Yeah. Play the psychology every time.
Yep.
So talk to us about, okay, so we have Reba Rent. We also have Reba BI. Mm-hmm. And then we also have a budgeting tool, the 3 products that you brought to the market. So, and I have to imagine that those 3 products complement each other in a big way. There's a reason why you picked those 3. So kind of talk to us about those complementing factors for each.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, it's all about a data analytics or a data insights platform. Mm-hmm. So, BI is sort of the glue that holds it together, right? BI needs a broad and deep set of data so you can actually do the dashboarding and the ad hoc analytics that you want to be able to do. Mm-hmm. Well, once you got that data, you start looking for cool things you can do with it around maybe creating some applications. So, budgeting and forecasting came to the fore right away. Pricing revenue management makes sense. We have an amenity analyzer application as well that really finds an unusual amount of hidden treasure on misplaced and or mispriced amenities. Mm-hmm. So those all exist today. Twinkle in my eye, Reno IRR trackers, lease up trackers, other things along. So it's not like there was some brilliant grand plan other than, if we have the data, then the market will tell us where they wish they could do things with the data. And so far, budgeting and forecasting, pricing revenue management, amenity analysis, those are the 3 that rose to the surface the fastest. And, we continue to work with clients and prospects on our own imagination to come up with other ones for the future.
Well, I'll tell you from a client perspective, and having used the system, and I love it. And you didn't pay me to say that, but the data visualizer where you can take in a community and you can either lay it flat or you can put it into 2D or 3D.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
and by the way, kudos to Ingrain, right? We have a partnership with Ingrain. Mm-hmm. So, Brent and his crew at Ingrain built the unit maps,
right,
that then allowed us to take the unit level data and layer it on. And it's really the combination. Like we don't have the bandwidth or skill to go do those maps.
Got it.
His people are geospatial folks. They're not so much the BI folks. And so it's the marriage of the two that really is powerful. Yeah.
Tell us, I'm just curious if you have a story that's tip of tongue or top of mind where there's a business use case where somebody has used that visualization. And
the one that had the biggest value, one of our clients that does high-rise development mm-hmm. was looking at the 3D, just the occupancy as the building leased up.
Yeah.
And about a quarter of the way through the lease up, they recognized that this one stack was leasing a lot faster than all the others. And so they dug in they found out that there was a $500 amenity that was missing.
Oh.
Okay. So a 40-story building,
Oh.
$500 per unit on that stack, on what was then a 4 cap. Go do the math. Instead of only finding out afterwards, maybe never, but instead of only finding out afterwards through some operational person later on figuring it out, 10 leases in, they figured it out and saved the other 30.
And pivoted quickly.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, press up a couple buttons on the keyboard and everything stabilized, and it didn't hurt the overall leasing velocity. The lease up was fine. They were leasing that stack too fast because the market, people touring recognized how great that unit in that stack was compared to the price.
Right.
Because a $500 amenity was missing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's massive. Right.
In terms of valuation and
yeah,
right. It's a huge number.
I mean, $500 on 40 stories, right? Yeah. That's $20,000.
Right.
Right. 25 cap. A 4 cap or a 25x is $500,000. One press of a button, one visualization, $500,000. That paid for Reba that year.
Yeah. 2 times over, 3 times over,
yeah,
100 times over. I'm taking a little bit of a sharp turn here. So Reba BI has this thing called the cube, and the cube is literally a cube, and you can go in and sort of extrapolate things out of the cube, and present data in a fashion that is useful to you or informative to you. I'm interested because AI, and I don't want to get buzzy here, but in my head, or there's a vision in my head where at some point you could create a sort of an AI interface that instead of trying to write complicated, extraction or having to rely on the Reba team, not that we didn't want to rely on the Reba team, but you could extract things out of there with prompts through AI. Yeah. Is that a possibility today, or will it be a possibility?
Okay. Yeah. Yes and no. So here's what I would say. And another link you could put up. We have a point of view paper on AI that describes all the different swim lanes of AI right now, predictive versus generative, and then different ways to use generative, et cetera.
Sure.
So on the generative side, I am particularly here's a use case that's really interesting to me. And, you having done some fee work will appreciate this, right? How many hours a month does a regional spend writing the report to the owner, right? I mean, if she's got 12 properties, if it's even 2 hours a property, that's 24 hours a month. Heck, if it's only 1 hour property, it's 12 hours a month.
That's right.
Right. Over 144 hours a year, right? What is that divided by 8? That's, north of 15 days.
That's right.
Just writing reports. Okay. Right. So generative AI, like what I have seen in generative AI is it writes rather trite things. Like,
yes.
NOI missed budget by X dollars driven by the top 3, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you and I are pretty quick reading a table or reading a chart.
Sure.
We don't really need AI to tell us that. We can find that out ourselves.
Yeah.
However, imagine a regional manager, instead of spending an hour or 2 per property per month combing through the reports to write that, imagine the generative AI creates the initial report and she spends 10 minutes editing it. Right? Yes. Don't send it out without editing. You never know what it's going to say.
That's right.
Right? You got to edit it. But, 10 minutes instead of an hour, or 10 minutes instead of 2 hours. I think that's an intriguing, by the way, that's not a game-changing use of AI. The world doesn't suddenly, become easier just because of that. But, if over the course of a year, I can save 140 hours of, heck, the regional, which because one thing I also learned about operations is the hardest job in operations is regional property management.
By far and away.
Right? Everything flows down from corporate, folks like you. Everything flows up from the sites, and they are just, bombarded by both sides. So their hours, in my mind, are more precious than any other hour in the company, maybe even the CEOs. And so, if we can save them some hours, that's great. Are we gonna find something that we otherwise didn't really know about the business? Only if you really don't know your business. But can we have an assistant help us and do some things that'll save us time? I think absolutely. The one technical challenge right now is actually very capable and sophisticated. Like, to truly have as capable a BI platform as Reba is, you have to have a data cube. And at the moment, the open AI kinds of tools, they can't parse through a queue. So go back to the hype cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever heard of the Gartner hype cycle,
I have.
right? AI is really in the peak of inflated expectations right now. Now, there are places where AI is, in the plateau of productivity. There are places that are hyped right now that will eventually get there, et cetera. But for all the hype around AI, and AI cannot read a cube. It can only read flat files. And even there, it needs an awful lot of prompt engineering. We've worked with several AI companies to work on exactly what you're saying, and the day will come. But right now, the amount of manpower needed to pre-train the model just on flat files, one of the things we're considering is actually taking the data from the cube and deconstructing it into some flat files so that AI can do something. So we went to all this trouble to build the genius into the cube. And in order to use AI, we have to deconstruct it back into flat files. That is the state of the art today. Now, a year from now, 3 years from now, I don't know how fast. Right? Someday, AI will parse an SSASQ.
Sure.
Can't do it today.
Somebody's working on it.
And we have talked to Microsoft and others. Like, we're not wrong. It cannot be done today with a queue, only with flat files.
The other interesting point, or at least, and this is I'm a novice at this sort of thing, but not only does it take a tremendous amount of data to train the model, but it also, when you're constructing the prompts necessary to extrapolate that data in a useful way, even though it's that prompt writing, if you're really getting deep into prompt writing, it's not simply typing a sentence into what you see as ChatGPT today.
Well, that's why. Look at some of the successful chatbots in our industry. And apologies to anybody I'm leaving out, but Elise AI, Elise Hawk, those kinds of players. Talk to them about how many hours have gone into training those models.
That's right.
But the juice is worth the squeeze because every single conversation and all the manpower across the entire company, across the entire industry, clearly the juice is worth the squeeze.
Sure.
When you and I start talking about analytics, well, we have a couple of analysts looking at a couple of things, like just using something like Reba BI, where instead of spending 80% of their time collating reports, right, we joke we're on a mission to get rid of VLOOKUPs and index statements. Right? So no more download these 3 reports, copy paste in Excel, blah, 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 right?
Right.
Just doing that is a game changer for the analytics side. How much AI really moves it forward from there? Again, I'm not trying to be, the old curmudgeon, get off my lawn, but I am saying, where is the juice worth the squeeze? And on the leasing side, on the repetitive process side, massive opportunity already being realized.
Sure.
On the analytics side, I won't embarrass who it was, but a large company, their head of AI was on a panel at OpTech. And Eric Rogers from Carmel asked a question about AI and small data. And this gentleman gave a 3-minute word salad answer that said nothing. And I don't know what it is about AI. Maybe, it's just the Gartner hype cycle. Why do people who are AI proponents have to pretend that AI can do everything? Right? I like my tools. I can use a chisel as a flathead screwdriver if I want to, and it might work, and I might cut myself. Yeah. So why not use a chisel to be a chisel and a screwdriver to be a screwdriver? If I were in charge of AI at one of these companies, and I was asked that question, my answer would be more like this: the right tool for the right problem. If you have a very small data set, it's Bayesian statistics. If you have kind of a normal data set, classical cluster analysis, regression analysis, et cetera, it's going to work just fine. AI is for big data, terabytes, petabytes, massive stuff. The NLP, the natural language processing that's behind something like ACE at Elise Hawk or Elise AI's solutions, et cetera, right? Some of this stuff that, I'm an advisor and a small investor, so, disclaimer on that. Nurture Boss, right? They use some AI to help figure out next step on the marketing funnel. Okay? Things like, so there's a lot of places where there is big enough data to do it, but don't pretend that AI is going to work on small data. It's not. It's just not.
Yeah. I think I'm completely making this up as speculation, but it seems to me that it would become useful over time when you start to marry together your data set with other public facing data sets, like net migration or in-migration, along with building all this other data sets.
Here's what I would say is AI can help you find observations you wouldn't otherwise find because you don't have the time to find it.
That's right.
If I know I want to look at those things, though, I could set up a classic model that would work just as well, and I wouldn't have to spend the time to train it. So the more data, the better the opportunity. The more broad I'm trying to figure things out, the better the opportunity. But I still have to put a lot of manpower on top of it because AI can hallucinate, right? I mean, recently there's a couple stories about lawyers who were busy and tired, so they had ChatGPT write a brief for them, submit it to the court, only it created false citations. And the court did have a court clerk look up the citations and found there's no such thing as that. And literally these lawyers, I mean, I know two different stories, two different lawyers, both lost their job with the firm because they submitted something that had a fake citation. It was not in bad faith, but judges don't really care about bad faith or good faith when you're sending them BS briefs. Okay.
Sure.
Kind of a problem. I had one interesting conversation with one of my board members at one of the operators. He wanted to do a comp analysis. So we had ChatGPT do a comp analysis on one of their properties. And it came back with 4 comps. And he read 3 of them, and he knew those 3, and they were actually pretty good representations, right? Like it saved him some time. The 4th one, he didn't recognize the name. He went and Googled on Google Maps. No such thing. It was a hallucination. Now, to his credit, now, play chess, not checkers, okay? Your initial reaction is, whoa, that's a complete, no, I can't do that. This isn't a court of law where you're citing something.
Sure.
He actually said to me he didn't mind because when he read that, because of the comp set, the hallucination, right? Remember how ChatGPT works. What's the next most likely word? What's the next most likely word?
Right.
The hallucination was actually sort of a composite homage to what the comps were. So even though it was a hallucination, for the purpose of understanding that comp space, he actually found even the hallucination to be useful in that context. That's different than the court situation, right?
Yeah, much different. That's
so understand how tools work, understand where they can go wrong, do your own due diligence. These are good lessons, whether it's AI or just because somebody's coming to you with a regression analysis, right? If you don't understand what R squared is, if you don't understand the difference between correlation and causality, you can misuse a regression analysis just as easily as you can misuse AI.
Certainly so. That seems like a fantastic place. We're up on an hour.
Yeah.
We can end this podcast on an R squared.
There you go.
A regression analysis.
That's a little too on brand for me, but thank you.
Well, I do want to give you the last word here. Is there what would you leave the viewers or listeners with as it relates to your wit and wisdom, and certainly where they can find you online?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. Find us at www.getreba.com. If you're struggling with anything analytic and you think there's not a solution out there, please come and talk to us. I don't know about wit and wisdom. I will just say, God, I'm coming up on 25 years in this industry now. I tell people I feel like an outsider, but I'm told after 25 years, that's not a valid claim. It's a wonderful industry with wonderful people, with wonderful problems to solve. And at the end of the day, we're solving for a core need of the human condition. And I know, Mike, with with what you do with Multifamily Collective and other things that sort of tying to a greater purpose is really meaningful to you. And that's been meaningful to me. I mean, it's a flypaper industry, right?
That's right.
I flitted about and managed to come upon it from the pricing side. Here I am 25 years later. There's a 10,000 plus, 100,000 plus other stories out there analogous of how people came here and just never left. And
that's right.
God, that says something about our industry in a really, really positive way, doesn't it?
It does.
So, don't let the haters hate. Government regulators and politicians are going to be politicians. We're doing a lot of good work in our industry, and let's just keep doing it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I would encourage any of the youth out there listening or watching, guys like Donald, Dom, and others. Look, they'll talk to you at a conference. Go up and tap them on the shoulder. They might be in a hurry, but they're going to certainly stop to talk to you.
This industry gives and shares more than any industry I've ever been involved in. My brother does sales enablement and coaching and marketing in that space. He's worked in at least 40 or 50 verticals with his client base.
Mm-hmm.
And he's done some work in our industry. And he's like, every industry says they're different and they're not. You guys are.
Yeah.
And, that really means something. So I couldn't agree more with you.
Definitely. Well, Donald, I always appreciate when you invest a little bit of time with me and with Multifamily Collective. I just think you're a scholar and a gentleman, and I appreciate you immensely.
Thank you.
And for everyone else, we will see you next time on Collective Conversations. Talk soon.
Thanks.